There is a belief so deeply embedded in the way we experience life that most of us never stop to question it. It feels obvious, almost self-evident, and it goes something like this. What happens to me alone. My pain is mine. My healing is mine. My struggles belong to me, and what I work through privately, separately, inside the walls of my own experience. It feels like common sense. And yet, this lesson comes to say that this is one of the most fundamental misunderstandings we carry. When I am healed, I am not healed alone. Let that land for a moment before we go any further. Not as a poetic idea, not as a feel-good concept, but as a literal statement about the nature of reality, about what healing actually is and what it actually does. The Course asks us to open and close the day with 10 minutes of real engagement with this idea. Morning and evening, not as bookends to an otherwise unconscious day, but as anchors. In the morning, those 10 minutes are preparation. You are not just reading a sentence. You are setting the operating principle for how you will move through the hours ahead. You are choosing, consciously, what lens you will see through. And through the day, as each hour passes, the practice continues with a simpler return. A single thought, revisited with intention. When I am healed, I am not healed alone. And I would share my healing with the world, that sickness may be banished from the mind of God's one Son, who is my only self. There is nothing complicated about the mechanics here. What the Course asks is not elaborate. It asks for presence, for willingness, and for a minute, just a minute, of every hour given to remembering what you are actually here to do. And at the close of day, those 10 minutes return, not to review how well you did, but to close the circle, to let the mind rest in the truth it has been practicing, however imperfectly, all day long. The Course is clear. Discipline matters here, not rigidity, not guilt when you forget, but genuine commitment. Because the practice is not about accumulating spiritual merit. It is about slowly, consistently retraining a mind that has spent a very long time believing the opposite of what this lesson teaches. To understand why healing is never private, we have to understand what the Course means by sickness in the first place. Sickness, in this framework, is not primarily something that happens to the body. It is something that happens in the mind. And at its core, sickness is a statement about separation. It says, I am apart. I am different. What affects you does not affect me. What is true for you is not necessarily true for me. We are, at the most fundamental level, separate beings living separate lives inside separate skins. The body becomes the ultimate proof of this belief. It has edges, it has borders. It can hurt without anyone else feeling the pain. It can be sick while everyone around it is well. What better evidence that we are, in the end, alone? And the world reinforces this constantly. We have entire systems built on the assumption that sickness is individual, that it is located here, in this body, and that healing means fixing what is broken in this particular form. But the Course challenges the premise, not the symptoms, the premise. It says that sickness is a retreat from others, a closing of the door, a refusal of joining, and in that refusal, the mind fractures, not literally, but experientially. It begins to experience itself as small, bounded, vulnerable, and ultimately mortal. The belief in separation does not just affect how we feel about each other. It affects how we experience ourselves. Healing, then, is not the reversal of physical symptoms. Healing is the reversal of this belief. It is the decision, quiet, internal, but enormously powerful to stop agreeing with the story that we are separate. To accept, even if only for a moment, that what appears to divide us is not the final truth. And the extraordinary consequence of that decision, and this is what Lesson 137 is really saying, is that it cannot be made privately. The moment you genuinely release the belief in separation, that release extends, not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual exaggeration, as the natural outpouring of what healing actually is. Think of it this way. If the belief in separation is what made us sick, if the sense of being cut off, isolated, and alone is the wound, then the healing of that wound is, by definition, a reconnection. And reconnection is not a private act. You cannot genuinely reconnect while staying isolated. You cannot experience oneness alone. This is the Course's logic, and it is airtight. Sickness isolates. Healing joins. Therefore, healing, at its most essential level, always reaches beyond the self that seems to be healed. The Course also makes a point here that I find both surprising and important. It says that healing is a counterdream. We tend to think of the spiritual path as a movement away from illusion toward truth. And in one sense, that is exactly what it is. But while we are still dreaming, still inside the experience of a world that appears real, healing operates within the dream to undo it. It does not confront the dream from outside. It dissolves it from within. This is what forgiveness also does. Forgiveness does not declare that nothing happened, and therefore you should feel fine. It goes deeper. It looks at what appears to have happened and recognizes that the story of sin, the story of permanent damage, the story of irreversible harm, these are not the final truth. And in that recognition, something shifts, not in the past, but in how the past is held. Healing works the same way. The sickness appeared real. The pain was experienced as real. The Course does not ask you to pretend otherwise. It asks you to look more honestly, to see that the foundation on which sickness was built, the belief in separation, has no ultimate reality. And as that foundation shifts, what was built upon it can no longer stand in the same way. So what does this mean for an ordinary day? It means that every moment of choosing peace over conflict is an act of healing, not just for me, but through me. Every time I decide not to meet an attack with a counterattack, something in the field of mind around me changes. Every time I let go of a grievance I have been holding, that release does not stay contained inside my experience. It moves. This is not something that requires grand gestures or visible impact. The Course is quite deliberate in saying that I will often not recognize those who receive what I give. The healing that moves through a mind genuinely committed to peace is not always traceable. It does not come with a receipt, but it is real. And this understanding changes the entire orientation of the practice. When I sit in the morning for those 10 minutes, I am not doing something for myself that might incidentally help others. I am participating in a process that is, from the very start, communal. I am offering something, not through performance, not through words necessarily, but through the quality of the mind I am choosing to inhabit. And through the day, when I return to this idea at each hour, even briefly, even imperfectly, I am reasserting my function. Not as someone who is privately working toward personal enlightenment, but as someone who has recognized that their own healing and the healing of the world around them are not two separate projects. There is something practically clarifying about this. When healing feels selfish, when taking time for my own inner work feels like a luxury or like something that pulls me away from being useful, this lesson dissolves that tension. The inner work is the useful work. A healed mind, one that has genuinely laid down even a fraction of its investment in separation and fear, becomes a source. Not because it tries to be, because that is what it is. I want to stay with something for a moment, because I think it is worth sitting with honestly. Most of us have had the experience of being in the presence of someone who was genuinely at peace, not performing peace, not using spiritual language to cover over a seething interior, but actually grounded, actually open, actually present. And you know how different that feels. It is not neutral. You do not walk away from that encounter unchanged. Something in their quality of being reached something in you, without effort, without strategy, without any intention to heal or help or influence. That is what this lesson is pointing to. Not that we must become some elevated spiritual presence, but that the mind's orientation toward separation or toward joining, toward fear or toward love is never private. It always extends. It always reaches. The question is only, what are we extending? And the answer to that question is not about what we say or even what we do in the most obvious sense. It is about the foundational choice we return to, moment by moment, about what we believe ourselves to be and what we believe others to be in relation to us. When I believe I am alone, when separation is the background assumption of everything I do, even my most generous actions carry a trace of that belief. They are given from one isolated self to another. They feel kind, but they reinforce the very story they seem to overcome. When I begin, even tentatively, to release that assumption, when healing is allowed to be not something I do privately, but something that moves through me, the same actions carry something different. They are no longer transactions between separate selves. They become expressions of a reality that was always already whole. The thought we carry today is not complicated. Its implications, however, are vast. When I am healed, I am not healed alone. This is not asking me to be responsible for the healing of the world in some overwhelming, exhausting way. It is asking me to recognize that my own peace, my own willingness, my own gentle turning away from the belief in separation, this is not small. This is not private. This extends in ways I may never fully see to all of it. The Course says, legions upon legions will receive the gift you receive when you are healed. Not as hyperbole, as the simple, factual description of how healing works. And so the practice today is not about getting through the day with good behavior or achieving some measurable spiritual result. It is about remembering, as often as I can, as genuinely as I can, that what I am doing inside my own mind is never sealed off from the rest of life. I heal with everyone. Everyone heals with me. The wall of separation that seemed so solid, so real, so final, healing reveals it was never there at all. This is today's function. This is today's gift. When I am healed, I am not healed alone, and I would share my healing with the world. That sickness may be banished from the mind of God's one Son, who is my only self. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next lesson.